Thank you, everyone. When I started my first year at UC Berkeley, I was so excited. This was going to be the first year that I would be independent, and I would finally get treated like an adult. And so I headed to my first class in EECS, which is short for Electrical Engineering and Computer Sciences, and opened the front doors and was shocked. Because in a class of over 300 students, I was one of only 6 women. And the problem wasn't that we were completely outnumbered, although that was always in the back of my mind. It was that because there were so few of us, we each stood out. We had become representatives for our gender. So if one of us asked a question, it wasn't that person doesn't know that answer. It was women don't understand the answer. And so on top of the difficulty of our major, we had the burden of being the good example. And this weighed especially hard on me as I started to fall behind in my classes. I was starting to learn things that I couldn't easily understand, and it seemed like my male classmates were doing so much better than me. I began to think maybe I didn't belong in EECS. And I remember being really embarrassed about falling behind and not reaching out for the help and support that I really needed. Looking back on it, it wasn't so much that I was that much worse than them, it was that they had the luxury of a head start. Because when I was growing up, many of the toys that foster going into computer science, like Legos, video games, or even computers themselves, were heavily marketed towards boys. And as a result, many of my male classmates had started to code when they were kids. And because I had never coded before, I was anywhere between 1 and 10 years behind them. I remember thinking, I don't know if I can do this, and maybe I'm not ready. And so I reached a major turning point in my life. I could either give up because it was too hard, or get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I chose the latter. And over the next couple of years, I started to pick up things faster. I stopped worrying so much about what everybody else was doing and just started to focus on trying to understand what I was being taught. The things that I had struggled so much with in my earlier years finally started to make sense. And so when I started my first job, I felt for the first time like I was actually an engineer, because there were things that I was building that people in the world were actually using. And I started to think more about not just doing my job, but making the software I was working on better. And luckily, my manager noticed my enthusiasm and offered me the opportunity to work on an amazing project with an amazing team. And at first, I was incredibly nervous. I remember thinking that not only was I the only woman who was going to be on the team, but I was also much more junior than all the other engineers on the team. But luckily, they were incredibly welcoming and supportive. They treated me with respect and without judgment, and made sure that I was part of every single decision that was getting made. We worked together well as a team because we treated each other like equals, and we made a better product because of it. And this story shouldn't be special to me, and it shouldn't be unique. And yet, at the same time, in my career, I've had plenty of managers who did not support me, or been on teams that didn't support me either. I work in an industry where it's considered normal that only 20% of the workforce are women, where there are still people who believe that we don't belong there, or that we're somehow less than. This is why it's so important for all of us here to support each other, to encourage each other, and to fight for each other. This is our time, but we can't do it alone. Together, we can shift the balance so that the next time a young woman opens the door to her first class, she's greeted by as many bright young women as she is men. Thank you.